We are
All
loading
right.
onto YouTube. And we're all set.
Okay, and if there are members of the public out there, this is viewable on LMC TV or on YouTube. And then the instructions are on the posted agenda, or on Zoom if you prefer. And if there are any members of the public out there paying attention to what we do appreciate it. This is public business. I'm going to make a motion to open the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're open. And the first agenda item for the evening is once again 1165 Grecian Point Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? This is Kristen Motel from Cuddy and Fader.
Yes, I can. Good evening, Ms. Motel.
Great.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I don't have video right now, but if you can hear me all right, let's just proceed.
Audio is just fine. I can hear your voice. Go ahead.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and it's nice to see you, Commissioner Exisa. I'm Kristen Motel from the law firm Cuddy and Fader, here on behalf of the applicants for 1165 Grecian Point. With me tonight is actually my colleague, Tony Giaffri, the property owners, Bill and Elizabeth Fedina, our floodplain specialist, Leonard Jackson, Rich Cordone from JMC, the site engineer, and Beth Evans, our wetlands and environmental consultant. And Mr. Chairman, I know it's been a few months since we were on. We were last before you in November, and we took a month to carefully consider those comments and prepare the materials requested. I don't know, since we have a new commissioner as well as new planning staff and a new council, if you want me to provide a more detailed overview of the project, or if you just like a brief recap of where we're at.
I know that our new council is up to speed on at least on the core issues that we've been talking a lot about. Whether we have a I've reviewed and I've made sure that that our council's familiar with your December 30 submission. I guess if we need a longer background, I'm going to leave it up to Ms. Achisa, because this is the first time that she's been on board for a discussion of this, and if she feels she needs the background, I won't get between her and that background.
That sounds good to me. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's sort of do the overview then.
Okay, great. So this is actually the applicant's 5th appearance. We submitted for the project in April, and since then we've taken usually a month in between meetings to, like I said, consider comments and thoroughly prepare the materials. The property is located along Delancey Cove within a floodplain. It's flood zone AE with a base flood elevation of 13. The property has wetlands as well as a wetland buffer area. The existing wetland and buffer area is actually maintained as lawn. There's no stormwater management infrastructure on the property, and it's not currently served by a sewer. Now, the applicant is here on referral from the planning board. They're seeking a wetlands permit for the proposed demolition of the existing home. That home is uninhabitable and in a state of disrepair. They're seeking to replace it with a new single-family home. It will be fully compliant with all FEMA and village floodplain development standards. The new home is also smaller in size than most of the surrounding homes on Grecian Point Road. As part of the project, the applicant seeks to replace the existing septic system which is failing, and it's partially located within a wetland buffer. We're seeking to replace it with a new septic system that meets the Department of Health code for Westchester County. In the last few months, there have been concessions made by the applicant and amendments to the project. So pretty considerable amendments that include decreasing the size of the garage, reconfiguring the garage so that it is no longer attached to the home. So eliminating the breezeway that was originally proposed as part of the home, making the driveway smaller, and moving the garage a lot closer to the road. All of that reduced the impervious surface that's proposed. So right now there's no increase in impervious surface that's proposed within the wetland buffer on the property. The applicant's also proposing wetland and buffer plantings to restore wetland habitat, to reduce erosion and flooding impacts, and to stabilize the shoreline. That was something that came about a few months ago as an outgrowth of commissioner comments. And as I mentioned, we're proposing stormwater management infrastructure where none exists now. And the home in the garage will actually, the new home in the garage will be placed further from the wetland than the existing home is today. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. As the commissioners are aware, most of the discussion on this application has really focused on the proposed import of fill to the site that is required to replace the existing septic system. Through the last 5 meetings and many months, we've decreased the proposed amount of fill. It was originally over 1,000 cubic yards, and now it's down to 420 cubic yards. As I previously mentioned, there's no public sewer on Grecian Point Road. There are 11 private sewer lines that were previously installed. The fill is being proposed as part of the septic system. It's needed for the required separation and for the septic system to meet code. It's not required for anything else, so it's exclusively for the septic system. And the applicant in November was asked to explore the feasibility of installing a public or a private sanitary sewer line, and to provide the commissioners with some evidence as to why we believe that it's not feasible to try to install a public or a private sewer line. That December 30th submission includes those details, and it also includes an opinion from Leonard Jackson that notes the addition of fill, the 420 cubic yards we're proposing, will not negatively impact the site. It won't negatively impact the surrounding properties, and it's not going to damage natural resources because of erosion or flooding, and therefore it is consistent with the LWRP. As you are aware, there's no policy in the LWRP exclusively prohibiting fill within a flood zone. However, we do understand the commissioner's concerns about fill and how that could possibly negatively impact the site and resources, neighboring lots when it comes to flooding and erosion. And as an outgrowth of the last meeting, the commissioners did bring Mr. Jackson on board. For those of you who aren't aware, he has over 47 years of experience in flood control design, and that includes flood control design for FEMA.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you there just a second, Ms. Motel, because I think you just unintentionally misspoke. You said the commissioners brought on board Mr. Jackson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The
Applicant.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
He's not working for us.
Good catch. No, that is very true. Let's see, where was I? Oh, so I know Sven Hogard, the village's environmental consultant, is not here tonight, but he has previously opined on the project, as well as Beth Evans, the applicant's environmental consultant. Both have determined that the project will not have negative impact to the wetlands, the natural resources, wetland species, or the buffer area. And the applicant has been granted a tidal wetlands permit from the DEC. And that was also included in our last submission. So I'll give a brief overview of the public and private sewer options as we outlaid them in the December submission. We do have a team of experts here tonight. So when I'm done, I'll turn this over to Leonard Jackson to give you a brief summary of his opinion. And then if there are questions from the commissioners about the sewer and any technical aspects of that, we have our team of consultants here who can answer those questions too. So turning to the public sewer connection feasibility, as I mentioned, there's no public sewer line on Grecian Point Road. And the applicant's actually very familiar with the process for installing a public sewer line. About a year and a half before we applied to the HCZMC, which was in April, they spent those almost 2 years working with the neighborhood trying to gauge interest for a public sewer. They were trying to pursue this. So, they helped educate the whole team on their findings and what they've undertaken. We did provide to the commission a brief overview of why the public sewer is not feasible. That includes first, it requires the abandonment of the existing private lines. Like I said, 11 private lines under Grecian Point Road. And per the Village and Westchester County Sanitary Code, any property owner that abuts a street with a public sewer must directly connect to that public sewer. So would it require abandonment of those 11 lines? Second, this portion of Grecian Road is privately owned. It's owned by the Grecian Point Road Corporation. It's not a public road. So therefore, any work to install sewer lines requires approvals and easements from this third-party corporation. And the applicant is here tonight. He can detail a little bit more of his conversations and his efforts with the corporation to talk to them about their interest in installing a public sewer line. We included some of those details in our submission. Also, for a public line, as you know, the village would need to accept dedication and assume operation and maintenance costs per county code. The applicant has tried numerous times to reach out to the village manager's office to gauge interest in this and have a discussion. To date, there hasn't been a response. So, we would respectfully submit between the required abandonment of 11 lines, the third-party owner, and the village needing to accept dedication, it would be impractical in this instance to install a public sewer. Turning to the private sewer connection feasibility, the same holds true with the third-party owner. The applicant also had previously explored whether or not they could install a private line. Back in 2019, we submitted correspondence in our December submission, which demonstrates that. And it also demonstrates that Hernani, the village engineer at the time, made the determination that there could not be another private line installed under Grecian Point Road. And also,
Okay, go ahead.
okay. And also, just to summarize something that we had spoken about last time, the county code prohibits an owner from connecting to an existing private line. Each private line can only serve one residence. So we can't connect to one of those 11 lines. We would need to install a new line. And installing a new line presents a number of different engineering concerns. Most importantly, it creates infrastructure overcrowding, and that could have potentially negative impacts on the environment as well as safety. With all of those lines in the street, and there's 11 sewer lines, but like I said, there's also stormwater infrastructure and public utility lines that exist. So things are becoming very crowded. There's an increased chance every time, somebody either needs to do maintenance or monitoring for accidental damage to an adjacent line, as well as, resulting in a leak to Long Island Sound. There's operation and maintenance issues associated with private lines as well. Each owner is responsible for identifying leaks and maintaining that line in the infrastructure. And since there is an increased risk of damage with so much infrastructure under the road, it would make it very difficult to identify where the leak is coming from and the person responsible for remediating that damage. And all of that is detailed more in our submission in JMC's memorandum. Rich Cordone can speak a little bit more to that. The addition of a line would also limit future space for any future utilities, drainage, or private infrastructure. And on top of this, it's a massive undertaking to negotiate access and easements with a third party, to close the street, to excavate, to lay the lines, to monitor. We would submit that it's not practical in this case when there is an existing failing septic system that can be replaced. So at this time, I can turn it over to Leonard Jackson. I think, he's going to speak just very briefly on his opinion with regard to the 420 cubic yards of fill that we're proposing. And we can go from there, Mr. Chairman, if that sounds like a good plan.
I guess the first thing I want to do, and because we have one commissioner who is discussing this in public for the first time, and I did this the last time this was up for us. We all know where we're focused. We are talking primarily about septic versus sewer feasibility and fill, because the fill is only necessary if the septic is necessary, and that's the question that most of us are focused on. But if someone has a question or concern that they want to talk about that is not sewer, septic, and fill, let's get that out of the way first, and then have the rest of our conversation about how we get to the evidentiary quantum each of us needs to cast our consistency vote on the core issues that we've all been focused on.
I have a quick question, if I can get it in. Thomas?
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question on the stormwater. Has our village engineer reviewed the stormwater plan?
From my last, I think from the last time this application was done, Brian, I think, clarified that all stormwater comments have been satisfied for the project.
The December 30th submission also included the recent memo from Brian, as well as our response. So I don't believe there are outstanding issues that would prevent a consistency determination. There are things that need to be done, standard things that need to be done before, for example, a building permit can be pulled.
Right, but didn't you change the plan? Isn't there a change in the stormwater of the cistern, those two infiltrators?
The stormwater's all been approved. The stormwater's all been reviewed by Brian and Kellard Sessions' office, and it's been that has largely not changed. That's all been reviewed and approved.
In the form that it existed for the November submission.
The form that it exists today.
Where is that? I thought Brian had left before you made your new submission.
Brian saw that previous submission. This has been this stormwater design has been this stormwater design for a while now.
I think, Rich, what you're saying is that the stormwater design hasn't changed since our November submission, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you were able to maintain the same SWIP when you made the changes in November?
That's correct. There were some minor edits, and there was a couple of things that we added onto there in the maintenance area where we discussed some work on the rainwater harvest, rain gardens. There was a maintenance question on that was addressed.
So since we've been focused on the sewer for the last few sessions, has the new engineer looked at this, and has a new engineer can the new engineer tell me about the groundwater and how this new stormwater system will integrate with the current soil conditions? Or if he hasn't, can you look at that now, or we'll come back to it?
I would have to look at the new stormwater plan and then provide comments. Just apologies, our office had a little compromise in our system, so it prevented us from reviewing and getting the review in time for this meeting. So,
right. Okay, if you can look at that, and I'm sorry, I remember Brian. What is your name?
Esteban Garcia.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you could look at that, if you have a few minutes, you just look at that, maybe we'll come back to it.
Okay.
I have some related questions I might tack on to that. So the SWIP is dated December 29th. I assume that there's minor updates is what I'm hearing. It's a little difficult for me, a 100-page document, to have an update 12/29 with no red line or anything. It seems like, at least going forward, that would be helpful.
Excuse me, Seamus, if you would look at the comment response that we prepared, we outlined exactly what we changed. The only thing that's changed in this SWIP is the addition of some the maintenance discussion on the rain gardens, I believe. It is outlined in the comment and response memorandum that was prepared for Kellard Sessions' office.
Okay, and it could just be that there's some documents here, but I thought I had gone through them all. So which document outlines the changes?
There's a memorandum that we prepared as part of the submission where we went through Kellard Sessions' review memorandum, and every comment that they prepared, we gave a concise response and explained what we did and how we responded to it. I'm trying to.
The date of that memo?
Everything would have been dated on the.
Is it called cover letter?
No.
Not the one for this meeting. It must be somewhere in the past.
This meeting did have one, but it was also the previous meeting that we had done. Every resubmission that we've done, any type of comments that we've made to the responses we've made to the village engineer, we have done a full comment response letter. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up your agenda here and see if I can find it.
Yeah, and what I was saying is I don't believe that was on our cover letter for today's meeting. It must have been on a cover letter for a prior meeting.
It was submitted.
And then I'll keep going because I just
if you look, I'm sorry, it's Exhibit Q in the agenda. Oh, no, that's not. I apologize. I saw the village engineer response letter.
I see that's dated 12/20/19.
So let me add the last piece on here on this topic for me. So like I said, it's it's helpful if you have something like a red line or something like here's what changed. And then I don't think that Kellard Sessions themselves since September 14th have produced anything, but I'd be happy to be pointed to it if they had, which is, other than your guys' responses, what I usually see from them is a response to the response where they kind of like addressed, okay. So I think that there's still the outstanding Kellard Sessions memo, the last one, asking about the Westchester County Health Department approval of the septic, talking about details on the rain garden, which it sounds like you addressed, avoiding submerged pipe networks, and a couple of minor items that were numbered number 23 through 26. So I don't think I've seen that loop closed yet.
Those are minor items, and we can work on that if we can work on that with Kellard Sessions. There's Kellard Sessions' office. There's nothing in those comments that we wouldn't be able to address and work with. Esteban, do you agree with that statement?
Yes, agreed.
Great. And I just wanted to piggyback Andrew because I had the same thoughts there. So that's all that I had on that.
Yeah, just to be clear, and just to be specific, so we know, what my question revolves the proposed subsurface detention system. That's where is it? It's as you look at the plan to the right, that's going to be buried to an elevation of 7.5. Right, and that's near that backyard that we've all experienced was very, very wet. I just want to, is there any testing? Is there any idea of what the soil conditions are at that depth? And this is also relevant to the septic system. What are the soil conditions at that depth? Will the water after a rain in a dry condition, whatever the conditions are, will the water that's detained there sufficiently be released and absorbed back into the ground?
Commissioner Maggio, we looked at this. This is actually a closed system. What it does is it's basically designed, there's a liner in there. These storm techs and cold techs, what they're there to do is they're actually there to detain the water and slowly release it back into the environment after a rain event, as opposed to having it just flush through the ground without having to, gently return. So that's kind of what we, how we have it designed. It's designed in accordance with the village code. It's also designed in accordance with the DEC standards. And if there's anything further with Kellard's office that they have any comments on or questions on, that's something that we'll be able to work through. With regarding the septic, deep test pits were dug. They were observed by the Westchester County Department of Health, and the septic system is proposed to be sited at an elevation that provides you a sufficient separation between rock and the bottom of the absorption fields. There was no water that was encountered on the front of the site at that elevation.
Right, that's exactly what I'm driving at. So the test pit data is submitted here with the rest of these documents?
That test pit data, I don't believe was submitted there because that was submitted to the health department.
Anything from the health department that has the test pit data?
No, that hasn't been circulated to your office. That's under the health department's purview, the elevation of any type of rock or groundwater. We can circulate them to you, surely, but there was no water that was encountered in the front of the house where the proposed septic system is going to be.
And what about the back of the house where the detention?
There's no test pits there. That stormwater system is designed to be a detention system. It's a watertight system that simply detains the water. It doesn't infiltrate. No test pits are required.
Well, I mean, ultimately it has to infiltrate. It's not, I mean, it could be filled up, right? So it's not designed to hold. It's not a closed system. It's an open system that releases the water slowly, though, right?
No, it's a closed system. It's a closed system that diffuses the water slowly at a slower rate under proposed conditions that it does under existing. So what it does is it's maintaining.
But ultimately, hold on. Right, it slowly diffuses the water, but slowly diffuses it into the ground, though, not into some other tank.
It sheet flows. It sheet flows the same way that it does in today's conditions.
Right. Ultimately, the water ends up in the ground, though, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So if you have any test pit data or health department data, anything about the absorption rates in the back of the property for the stormwater and in the front of this property for the septic system, I'd love to see that. If you have it, do you not have it? If you don't have it, you don't have it.
I don't have it here tonight. Okay,
not tonight. That's okay. That's okay.
We have test results. We have test results for the front of the property. We have nothing in the back. There's no outline from the DEC or the village code or anything that requires testing for percolation rates for a closed absorption system. The system has been, the existing system's proposed exactly where the current garage is. So we were able to eliminate the necessity to bring fill in for that. It's designed, everything is designed in accordance with all the regulations that are out there, be it DEC, be it village, be it New York State Building Code. The system is 100% compliant.
Right. I'm sure it's compliant, but I just don't you want to know if you're releasing water into the ground that the ground can absorb that water? Isn't that something?
The ground's taking the water. There's no difference in the amount of water that falls today than is going to fall tomorrow. There's no impact on this with this stormwater system. The only difference is the water after it goes through a stormwater system is going to be cleaner after post-development than pre-development, because the water is going to be going through, it's going to be going through a rainwater harvesting tank where it's being allowed to settle. It's going to be going through a detention system where it's settling out and it's slowly being dispersed into the environment, as opposed to the sheet flow that's happening on the site today.
Right. And again, the reason I asked, so you understand my thought, is just because that backyard is super wet, and every time I've been there, I've noticed that it's very wet, and that this is going to be buried pretty far into the ground, just to see if the ground is that wet all the time or some of the time, or when you did a test pit. But any information you have, if you could forward it on, I'd like to take a look.
Understood.
If you have it, if you don't, you don't. Fine.
We don't have any information for the back of the building.
Okay, that's an answer. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on items that are not the fill, sewer, the septic? Martin.
So first off, I would like to say thank you for addressing Exhibit B directly to me about the grasses. However, I do think that there is. I appreciate that this document establishes that grasses are a good proposal. However, the response is a little confused because it's comparing whether trees are better, or whether grasses are better than trees. And that was really not where my comment was coming from. Our comments were coming from the removal of the trees and their root system, their already existing root systems, not planting new trees and waiting for them to grow in order to be able to stabilize the ground. So
Understood, Commissioner Hain. And at the same time, what we're trying to do is express to you and explain to you the difference in, when you have an existing tree canopy, there's no grass underneath that tree. Very, very sparse grass. It's more prone actually to erosion as opposed to as if it was vegetated. That's, if you look at a lot of large trees, you'll see that there's a substantial sparse patch of grass that is susceptible to erosion. I understand the roots of those trees, they go deeper. So that's why they're gonna hold back the soils that's, a foot deep, 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep, but it's not going to do anything for the soils that are all the way up on the top. The soils on the top, unless you have some type of mulch or something else like that that's planted there, or some type of mulch or something to hold back the erosion, you're not going to be able to get a vegetation that grows on the understory.
I understand that. I was just trying to clarify that the comparison that was being made was not directly addressing the issue that was brought forth.
All right. Are we through our sort of non-core items? All right, then I think we return to the continuing discussion about the feasibility of sewer options as distinct from septic. I want to ask what may be a silly question, because we may have sort of skipped a step in what I think was the preliminary review discussion. We heard that the existing septic system was non-functional and needed to be replaced with a new one. And we've been talking ever since about whether it needed to be replaced with a new one that requires fill, or it needs to be replaced with some kind of sewer connection instead. What is the state of the existing system, and why couldn't that be rehabilitated in place, given that it obviously has clearance that doesn't require further fill?
It does require further fill. In order to construct a system that's in accordance with the health department regulations, the applicant would be required to bring fill in.
Would it be unlawful for them to simply fix the existing system in kind in place?
The existing system is not, it's clogged. There's nothing to fix.
When you say there's nothing to fix, I mean,
you would have to replace the septic tank and the septic fields. If you're to replace the septic tank and the septic fields, that is no longer a repair. That's considered a remediation, and a remediation with the health department means it has to be brought up to current standards. For us to do anything but the right fix here is much worse than for us to install a septic system in the existing grade. It's going to fail. It's setting ourselves up for failure. We're not going to have a system it's worse for the environment to do a Band-Aid like that than it would be to do the system the right way.
Okay, thank you. That's a straight answer, and I think I needed to feel like I had touched the base on that part of the record. So I've asked and you've answered why the existing one is a no-go. So we are at septic with fill or some kind of sewer connection. Now I will tell you I've been through the December 30 memo that for administrative reasons we haven't had quite that long with it. It wasn't uploaded quite right away, so I've had a little less time with it than perhaps I would have liked. But I've been over it a few times, and my reaction to it is there are things here that are brand new to me, at least in terms of as a focus of the discussion. We've talked a little bit about that there are a number of other lines under the road, but this is the first time I've seen really fleshed out the idea that the primary concern, or one of the primary concerns with a private line, is that there are already 11 there, and the difficulty of putting in another one comes from the danger of damaging another existing line. I kind of look at everything through the eyes that I bring to my day job, and I'm a litigator, and there's a word that I hate that judges throw at me sometimes when I lose. That word is speculative. It seems some things are easily quantified and some things are just, this is what I think. It seems both odd and difficult to quantify, to say that the reason something can't be done is in fact that it can be done, but there's a risk of something going wrong, because there's always a risk of something going wrong. There are lines in the road, but there are 11 houses that are on private sewer lines. We don't know in advance, and as far as I can tell from the submission, can't quantify whether something else is going to be damaged in laying that line. Is there something you could give me that would quantify for me how likely it is that another line would be damaged in trying to lay an additional private line connection?
There's,
Mr. Chairman, I think before we address that question, which is a very good question, there's also more than just our concern about damaging an existing line by installing this line. It's then the operation and maintenance required going forward of everything in the road, right? So it's not just the fact that, oh, we're concerned about installing it. We're concerned about installing and maintenance. And like I said, that's just one of like the four principal reasons, but I understand what you're saying. I just want to make that clear.
Ms. Motel, that is entirely fair. I'm trying to, that's right. I hadn't thought with much intensity about, where in the hierarchy of reasons this is a problem. I should put, well, there's a lot of stuff under that road, and it's really taken. You're right that it's not the only thing that the submission says. It's taken a prominent role, and so now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking that it's both unquantified forecasting, and I'm concerned that it's speculative. Mr. Gottlieb, is there? I'm picking on you, but if anybody else knows, thinks they can answer this for me, answer this for me. Can we get a consultant to give us more an independent set of insight into the engineering problem of laying a new private line where there are a large number of existing private lines? I understand that it's a line of spaghetti under there. There's a lot of stuff there. I need to understand, as independently as I can, how much of a feasibility concern that is, and how much it's a pain but not a showstopper.
Sure. So this board, just like any other land use board, has the ability to hire consultants that are needed throughout the review process as they deem necessary. I do think that the village has escrow abilities, and without any other approval, this board is completely reasonable to hire a consultant if you feel as though information has been submitted in the record that you as volunteers, because I don't think anyone's getting paid to be on the commission, might not have. And so typically an applicant will come with a consulting team. And a lot of times it is only fair that the land use board has a professional that can concur, dissent, or come up with maybe a new creative idea that hasn't yet been considered.
I mean, typically most often we either look to the experience of an environmental consultant, where we most often work with Sven Hoger, and we know him well and we know what we want to ask him, or we work with our consulting engineers. We are really drilling down on some specialized stuff. And we're down to, and I'm going to say this just to preview it for everybody. I'm sort of thinking the same way about hydrography, because everyone on this call has heard me probably at least twice say something about how much we dislike net fill in floodplains. We drive it out of applications whenever we can. When we have permitted, in my time on the commission, when we have permitted any net fill in a project where the project is in a floodplain, the fill itself has been outside the floodplain part of the project. And I think there may be precedents where that wasn't the case before my time. I've never allowed it. I know that I'm the hawk on these issues. If we're going to think about that in terms of wiggle room, and when I say that, I'm talking about the last page of the JMC report that we got dated the 29th. If we're to think more flexibly about net fill, I'm going to need a specialist to tell me that whether I should or shouldn't be doing it. I have this, there are more people killed by floods in America than any other kind of natural disaster. People live in floodplains, and we don't bar all development in floodplains. We're talking about, we've authorized them before and we'll authorize them again. Being very cautious about net fill in floodplains is a way that we prevent development here that puts things and people in harm's way. And we as a commission have been extremely cautious about that, both in a riverine and a coastal environment. I understand the hydrography is a little different. I feel like I need a better before I could say that I can vote consistent on net fill in a floodplain. I also think I need our own hydrologist.
Mr. Chairman, I hear what you're saying. I would also ask that our floodplain specialist, Lenny Jackson, be elevated to panelist so that he can also give you his opinion in a summary, because like I said, he is one of the leading experts in that field. And then as to the sewer questions, our team of experts and engineers has been working with Kellard Sessions' office about that. So I know, Kellard Sessions is already retained as the village engineer. They've already been familiar with this project. I'm sure that they can opine and comment on questions regarding sewer feasibility to the extent that, we can move this forward.
Yes, I can say for myself that absolutely both of those things are going to be useful. I have made it pretty clear that I think I need to have a very good understanding of what I'm voting on here before I cast my vote for on consistency on this project. I think that's probably what's next up, unless somebody really wants to interject something now that would move us forward before we hear from the consulting team for the
I would
applicant.
just ask one question. Is this the first time that the board is hearing from Mr. Jackson or has seen his letter report?
Yes.
Okay, so if the board does want to go down the road of a consultant, oftentimes what I both tell clients and boards and so forth is, when you look for a consultant, to find someone that has the same general background. That way, you were assured that you're getting a comprehensive review kind of from the beginning. And there's, it reduces the amount of catch up that has to happen.
That's probably right. And the faster, but if we're going to need consultants on this, and we're going to need to do it fast, because when we have to hear from an applicant several times, it starts to really make my teeth ache. Whatever we end up doing, and not that the time has been wasted. We're looking at a much different application now, and the process has been extremely useful and productive, but I hate it when it goes long. We're a lot of meetings into this, so we need to hop on that right away. Amber, I will call you first thing tomorrow morning. I think we don't need a board action to select our consultant, as long as everybody agrees we need one, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to just take a consensus on whether or not to retain a consultant, you could even, express the scope of what you would like that consultant to review. My office is happy to reach out and then give the board a list of consultants that you may want to consider.
Okay, I think I don't want to try to outline the scope. I know what I think my questions are, but I don't want to try to outline the scope until after we've heard from Mr. Jackson, because I think that's going to be a useful and illuminating discussion. So I think probably he has the floor.
Thank you. Amber, were you able to elevate Leonard Jackson to panelist?
So I don't see anyone with that name on the attendees list. So if he could just raise his hand so that I know who, unless he's dialing in from a number.
While we're waiting for this, can I just follow up on a quick utility question? Or you want to do that later? Thomas?
Yeah, anything that moves the ball forward. You have the floor,
Okay.
Andrew.
So quick question here. As I look, we're concerned about if we put another sewer line, opening the road and disturbing the other lines. And Esteban and Mr. Cardone, if you could just follow you here. According to the plan, it looks like there's 10 pipes that run in one trench on the left side of the road as you go down towards the water. So, and those pipes are 1.25 inches to 2 inches in diameter. So if you have 10 pipes, let's use 2 inches, it's 20 inches, rounded up to 2 feet. That's just one 2-foot trench. There's also a gas line and a water line on the left-hand side. It looks like there's the 11th private sewer line, which is only 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter, is on the other side of the street. The street's pretty wide there, right? Is the concern that you would hit just that left side, or my point being, if you had to run another line, it seems like you have plenty of room in the street to run this thing, or you just run it in the same trench where where the 10 other private sewer lines are. I'm trying to figure out what the actual problem is with the street. It's not like those pipes are spaced 1 foot across. Every foot there's a pipe running. It seems like the 90% of them are in one trench. Is that right or wrong?
And Andrew, which plan are you looking at? I'm just trying to get a
J.A.
attachment.
J.A. Kirby plan, exit N as built of sewer lines, J.A. Kirby land survey dated 11/23/2004.
Okay.
Am I reading that incorrectly, where most of the utilities run down far left-hand side of the street?
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the plan right now.
I'm on page, I'm on the
What,
second page.
You're on SP2?
SB2, yes. I'm looking specifically at the bottom footnote, kind of in the middle. It says 10 pipes, 2-inch, 1 2-inch HDPE, 1 2-inch HDPE reserved for future use. We discussed that there's one there that be great to get the applicant to get permission from the use, but that's not practical. Then there's one. The rest of them are 1 1/4-inch pipes. Did you see that note on the bottom of the page?
I'm seeing the next one where it says 8 pipes, a 2-inch HDPE for future use. And
Yeah, right. That's further down the road because I think 2 of them branched off into houses. But if you look to the right of that, it says 10 pipes. But whichever way you look at it, 10 pipes, 8 pipes, it's all one heavy line on kind of the extreme left-hand side of the road as you go down.
True. Yes.
So that's where all those pipes are, really, one trench.
Those pipes are in about a 4 to 5 foot wide swath, and they're not in a tight trench. That's from speaking with, we spoke with the previous village engineer, Benny Salanicho, who watched it go in. It's not a nice, clean, it's not a perfectly stacked, clean installation like you would expect from, say, an electrical duct bank. These are force mains that were placed in a wide trench, and there was rock that was encountered. So there was a little bit of work that was done to, try to make these things work.
Did they go in a group, or did they go in one at a time?
There were 2 separate times that went on. Hold just a second. I'm sorry. Yes. Hello. 808241. Yes. Okay. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get my floodplain consultant on the line. He's saying, Amber, he's telling me that the 808241 is not working for the passcode.
Okay, it should just be what is at the top of the agenda, as that has not changed.
Yeah. Yes, Amber. He's trying to dial in.
The dial-in number is 646-558-8656.
Yes, and then does he have to do the passcode?
Is it asking for a passcode?
Yes, and he's putting the passcode in, and it's not working. Okay. It's asking for a passcode, right, Lenny?
No, he's got to put the meeting ID in there. There's a meeting ID number.
So you have to put the meeting ID number, and the meeting ID number is 951-0481.
And then the next prompt asking for a passcode. Don't put in a passcode, just press pound.
Okay, and then the next prompt, you're just going to hit pound. All right. All right, thanks, Lenny. I'm staying.
On the 2 occasions when the existing sewer pipes were put in, were there any pipe ruptures during construction?
No, the majority of them were put in at one time. There were 2 or 3 that were put in on a later time.
Okay, so there were something like 8 in, and then they installed another 2 or 3.
There were 2 in, and then they installed 8. So, and the biggest concern is when the contractor's going out to install this, there's no way to magnetically locate these lines or actually locate these lines subsurfacely without having to actually excavate it. So he's going to go through there and he's going to try to find this. And these lines are, I understand they're 1.5-inch lines. There's a couple inches in between them. By the time you're done, your pathway there is about 4 feet. With all these lines, you have a 1-inch line, a couple inches in between, and then another 1-inch line. It gets quite large. So if one of these lines were to rupture, there's no identifying feature on this line to even necessarily be able to identifies precisely who it belongs to. There's no shutoff valves that are installed along this line, so that way they can shut this off. So potentially they could hit this line here and have sewage coming up into the ground, coming
Yeah,
through.
but I mean, look, people dig in the street with high pressure gas lines. Typically what you do is you dig with a machine until you get to the depth that's on the plan. Then you hand dig, then you hit sand. When you start excavating sand, you know you're near the lines.
Understand, Chairman Maggio. We've been doing this. I've been doing this a
I know
long
this
time as
stuff.
well.
I mean, I've done this. I understand how this works.
It hasn't been brought up yet, Chairman Burt, but I do think that you know, part of the argument is also how long it would take, or the process. That was part of the paperwork that was submitted as well. That I think part of the pushback also is that this would take, you know, 3 years for them to complete putting the sewer line in. So that's also something I would want this expert to sort of give us some feedback on, actual, you know, timing of the event as well.
Yeah, well, and that argument sort of depends on whether we're talking public or private, right? I haven't asked much about public because I read that and I don't have a lot of questions about it. I understand that the existing homeowners might be attached to their existing private lines and not want to give them up, and therefore might be resistant. The argument about getting the easement just sounds very different to me when we're talking about a private line. They're gonna lay their own line. Everybody else has already.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I just want to confirm the call-in number of the consultant, because I otherwise don't know who.
What do you got? I think it's either
728. Okay, great.
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Jackson is able to join us.
Can you finish your thoughts on what we were just discussing?
I was just going to say that the road is a private road, as we've said, but not all homeowners on the road have sewer lines. So this isn't a situation where everyone else has one and we're seeking to get one. This is a case where there are a select number of homes that have them, and we've provided you with that map so that you can see that. So, you know, the road, we would need permission from a private corporation, and not all the members of that corporation have private sewer lines. So it's not as easy as, well, you have one, we want one too. And then hence the 2 years of discussions our clients and the applicants have had with all of these members, you know, trying to gauge interest and trying to get support to do this, to do a sewer. And really it's just not amounting to anything. And so there's
to do a public sewer, or to let somebody buy one of theirs.
Any sewer.
They've also looked at doing a private sewer as well. But that also requires permission from the road corporation, a third party, and the applicant can't control what the third party decides to do. I mean, they've had discussions with them, but to an extent, you know, that's an entirely different entity.
Okay,
Well,
I understand
has the
the point.
private road corporation said no?
The private road corporation has some serious concerns, and I will let the applicant speak to his discussions with them about whether or not they'd be supportive of a private sewer line. So you're hearing directly from him, and we can do that maybe after you hear from Mr. Jackson. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Lenny, are you there?
I believe it's *6 to unmute.
Can Mr. Jackson hear us? Because if he can hear us, he's halfway there.
Amber, can you unmute him as the host?
I can only ask to unmute, which I've clicked several times.
Okay.
If anyone from his team perhaps wants to email him, that might be helpful.
Is he at least on the line, but just can't speak?
That's what I understand. I understand that this 631 number is the consultant, Lenny.
Amber, 631-728-6148.
631-728-2748 is what.
All right, it's probably a landline. Okay, let me see.
In the interest of just moving things forward, I'll ask at this time Bill Fedina, the applicant, to comment on his discussions with the road corporation. I think that would be helpful here.
Mr. Fedina, you have the floor.
Thank you, commissioners. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
I can hear you just fine, yes.
Perfect. Yes. So in our November meeting, I'd shown the timeline, and you've seen a lot of the information we submitted. So bought the house in June of 2018.
And now I can't hear you.
And now we've lost your audio, Bill.
Sorry. I tend to pride myself on being somewhat tech savvy. Is this better at all?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you again.
Okay. So June of 2018, we bought the house. In August of 18, we started talking to the village engineer at that time. And in September of 18, we had the first road corporation meeting. They meet once annually. It's 19 of our neighbors. And so Hernani, that village engineer at that time, very clearly said, we're not approving any private lines. It's a disaster for maintenance. We don't know how, if there's a code 53, who's going to respond. We don't know the lines, you know, and I know you have a lot of private lines. You can't connect to one or share one because that's deemed a common line. That's a public line. So that kicked off a process of how can we get a public sewer line, or frankly, any sewer line, since he eliminated the private sewer line approach. So over the next, year and a quarter, we had the road court meeting in September. I presented, I said, here are my intentions. I'd like to get a sewer on the road. And that kicked off a 6-month process where I paid a lot of money to J. Kirby, those as-built engineering plans you've seen. I had to pay every single party that was involved from 2005 to 2007 to get all the information that you're all reviewing. The village had no knowledge of any sewer lines on the road when I approached them. I provided everything I provided to you to them over the course of this 6-month period. I wrote a letter signed by 4 of my other neighbors in February of 2019, expressing my intention to use, as Commissioner Maggio said, that deemed extra sewer line to connect to that as some other neighbors, because it's already in the road, and that would be a very nice solution. So what I had said to them was, okay, I have a few neighbors who looked at this, the road corporation, and so I don't want to speak to all of our private conversations, but in a sentence, if whatever is done is beneficial to all neighbors or doesn't negatively impact all neighbors, there is a lot of support to do something. The reality was, in 2005, to get those 5 homeowners, which had 9 sewer lines, to get that approved, one of the biggest things was that extra sewer line was installed so that any neighbor that didn't have the financial means, the ability at that time to join, could connect to that sewer line later. That was the single biggest reason all the neighbors agreed to do it. And obviously, it was somewhat crushing when I presented in 2018, and all the neighbors were on board and said, yes, we would very much be in favor of using that extra sewer line. And the village engineer responded very promptly, saying, noted on that extra sewer line, but it's a violation of code to use it. So that set off a lot of different iterations of how can we get a sewer line. The answer was, could you do a public line? Could we do a private line? Again, they said no private lines are being approved now. And Commissioner Burt, as evidence on timing, as a litigator using the concept of a precedent, Homix Road started looking to put in a private line and a public sewer line in 2017, and that's still not even done. So we can obviously have a consultant opine on timing, but that's a very live example of something that started in 2017 and still not done. So throughout 2019, what I continued to do, I can be told no a fair number of times and try to rationally come up with a solution. So I went and tested the hydrostatic air pressure test on the sewer line with the permission of my neighbors who own it, as a way of saying, well, maybe there's a solution where we can still use that line, and could we maybe get the health department to give a variance that we can have a public line and a private line all together. And so even being told no ahead of time, paid, did that test, the line came back satisfactory, and told again, that was good job, but I'm sorry, no. The reason it was a no was if there's a report that needs to occur, and Rich Cordone from JMC said, want to have a hidden when you're repairing a line, but very specifically,
Mr. Fedina, your voice is becoming pixelated. If you could slow down, that might help.
Sure. Sorry, I'm trying to move closer to the microphone, if that helps.
Thank you.
I will talk slower. And so he said, well, to make this happen, you have to cut all of the private sewer lines, cap them, and they can never be used again. That's an untenable solution for our neighbors. That would be considered negatively impacting them. So I said, what if we somehow made the line curve around the manholes, put in a new manhole, so maybe on a repair at the key junction, we could use this again as the line. The answer was no again, because they said, what if there was an issue not at the manhole, some other part along the line, and in repairing the line, we damaged any of the other lines. That would be a catastrophic event for sewage and leakage, but also monetarily for the village. So we went through a bunch of this, and it ultimately came down to, okay, well, what if we just build a public sewer line? Because private line was ruled out. Public line, brand new one, new trench. So we even had calls with the other utilities, Westchester Joint Waterworks, saying, hey, because if you look at the right-of-way survey that was provided, again, that is a not cheap, very expensive survey. We paid just to see if we could map the entire road and everything on the road. You'll notice that that exhibit was submitted as well to this committee. You'll see that on that survey, there are setbacks between utilities, obviously water and then gas. But more importantly, you'll see the sewer lines cross under the water line where Grecian Point Road sort of dog legs to the left. And where it does that, Westchester Joint Waterworks was, Rich, you were on the call, they were basically very hesitant to allow any crossing of the line without concrete casing the line. So a concrete casing is the solution because you can potentially engineer around everything. But then we said, okay, let's say we could figure out an engineering solution, purely engineering. And if we put in a public sewer line, I still have to have 11 of my neighbors kill their private sewer lines, which is somewhat of an insurmountable ask for no other reason than they've had them for years. They paid a lot of capital for it, and some of them even have spare lines. And without doing that, I don't know property rights, but I don't know if someone could seize them and with just compensation. It's the fact that it's not just a neighbor taking a line. As they're a voting member of the road corporation, they can block the road to do that because you have to dig up the road to put in a public line. So it's a confluence of all these factors that ultimately we said we're giving up. It'd be nice after this year and a half to get this done. Let's go to septic. And I think you now know, since I first talked in April, yes, we designed a certain house that I thought was nice for our family, and respectfully didn't know a lot about the rules of consistency and how it worked. And we, for literally every change since April, was to try to appeal to the committee's interpretation of consistency and get with the unique circumstances here. And happy to answer anything, of course, about the sewer process. I just think it's important to know that I did spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars and lots of time way in advance to try to get any sewer with the village. And I admittedly, I failed. And what you've helped do is shine a light to a lot of parties. I've talked to a lot of my neighbors over the last couple months as well. And it basically re-highlights that there are a lot of views on how things should be done on a very, very local level, on a village level, a county level. And the feasibility of everything is something we've really struggled with. So that's why I obviously appreciate if we could work through, finding consistency in this very unique example.
All right. Thank you for walking through the timeline. I understand we're now able to get Mr. Jackson on.
Hello.
Lenny, can you speak again?
Yes, here I am. What can I do for you?
Mr. Jackson, this is Thomas Burt. I'm the chair of Harbor Coastal, and we've reviewed the letter of December 30 and the report of December 29, and we wanted to hear what you have to say about. Speaking for myself, I'm most interested in the feasibility of running a new private line from 1165. If you could speak to that, and I'll sort of flesh out questions as we go.
Well, my input was regarding the flood elevations and the effect of this construction on Grecian Point Road on flood elevations. And the reason I was asked to consult on that is because I prepared the flood insurance study update for Westchester County as a consultant to FEMA. And I'm not familiar with what line you're talking.
I'm sorry. We've been going for a while on some related issues, and I asked you the wrong question. You're the flood elevation person.
Well, I am an engineer, so if you can outline a question for a problem for me, I'll try to help solve it for you.
We've been talking about this proposal, and it requires in order for them to get the septic tank the septic system we've been talking about, their current need is 400 cubic yards of fill. This is a floodplain. The actual, not the fill, but the much of the construction is within the 100-foot buffer for the wetland. Our commission has typically, as you may know, the village does not permit net fill in wetlands.
Yes.
That's obviously a rule for riverine flooding that doesn't really admit of exceptions. When our commission has looked at the no net fill rule, we have been extremely reluctant to allow net fill even in coastal circumstances. And when we've allowed net fill on a coastal property that is in a floodplain, we've in recent years only allowed it on the parts of the property that are not themselves in the floodplain. Can you explain to me what is different about this property that we should allow net fill in a floodplain that doesn't open us up to people essentially using the fill and build island plan to put development of a more intense kind into the most coastal facing and sensitive areas that we've got?
Okay, let me expound on that. First of all, the wetlands, filling a wetlands is an environmental issue. A wetland is not necessarily a floodplain, but a floodplain, in fact, could be a wetland as well. But this is not an environmental question, and I'm not an environmentalist. I do hydraulics and hydrology. When you fill in a tidal flood area, there are certain areas where the fill may have an effect on adjacent parcels, and that's called, it's a VE zone. V stands for velocity. If you're in an area where there's wave run up, and you build something in an area such as that, the wave could be deflected and affect adjacent properties. I looked at the FEMA maps, which I prepared in 2007. At least I updated them for FEMA. And this property is not in a V zone; it's in an AE zone. An AE zone is a tidal zone in this particular instance. And if you place fill in this area, and specifically, the tide will rise and fall, but it will not affect the elevation of the tide. And so in this particular instance, you have a tidal zone with no velocity. There's nothing for me to analyze. And it's not an environmental issue, I presume, because that's a different matter altogether. But in this particular location, if you place a fill in this floodplain, it will have no effect whatsoever hydraulically on the elevation of Long Island Sound.
What's the 500-year flood elevation? We've got the 100-year BFE, which I believe is 13 feet here. What's the 500-year flood elevation?
I don't have that at my fingertips. I didn't know that I would have to look into that. But if you happen to have the flood insurance study available to you, you could just look at it and see.
Right.
And by the way, the 500-year flood elevation is a similar elevation in terms of filling in this particular area. As long as it's not in a V zone and there's no wave run up, it won't have any effect on the flood elevation.
Well, when you say it won't have any effect on the flood elevation, it's not going to change the elevation at the neighboring property.
That won't change it. It won't change it anywhere.
Right, I understand that. So,
yeah.
But in a tidal zone, if you change the grade, in a tidal zone, if an area becomes inundated during a tidal flood, and you change the topography, the velocity of flow both in and out can change, right?
In this particular instance, because there's not an estuary where you could actually constrict the flow up the estuary, in this instance it's open and therefore it will have no effect.
Well, I mean, if you have two properties that are mostly filled in a deeper valley that drops off 4, 5, 6 feet between them, then as a flood runs in or out, a lot of the volume is going to fall into that valley, and that'll have an increased velocity, right?
If this were, you're correct. If this were an estuary where there was a constricted flow rate, and as the water elevation goes up, the flow has to go up into the estuary. And yes, if you constrict to the estuary, you would in fact affect the elevation. In fact, you might slow it down. You may lower the elevation in the estuary. But in this case, because it's wide open, there's no effect one way or the other. But it's true. If you had a long estuary and it was tidally affected, like the Hudson River, and you constricted the inflow of the tide, you'd actually reduce the elevation upstream.
Well, I mean, even on beach sand, right? If you build two big platforms with a V between them, the water will flow faster in the V, right?
Oh yeah, but what you're doing is you're creating an estuary. That's not the case here.
Right. Okay. You're saying that the fill here won't elevate it enough above the neighboring property to create that effect.
And it will not affect it at all.
Have you analyzed that if it would be relevant to on a very micro level of just looking at the grade of this property and the next door property?
There's frankly nothing to analyze. If it were a V zone, and when you when you do these types of analyses, you do transects, which is sections. You take sections along the coastline, and that's how you do the analysis. In this instance, it's so wide open, there's nothing really for me to analyze.
Well, just to push it to the absurd to sort of prove the point, if you were to put a whole lot of fill on just this property, like thousands of cubic meters, would the next door properties be impacted?
Not at all.
Well, no, where I was going is somewhere else, right? You've got Martin, you're on mute, but my question was, so if you put 5,000 yards of fill on this property and 5,000 yards of fill on the neighboring property, and left a ravine between the two properties, that ravine would be an artificial estuarine condition that would have some higher velocity water traveling through it as the tidal flood came in and out, right?
Well, if you created that, but now you have to tell me what's behind. If you try to constrict the inflow of the tidal waters, and as the water rises, it does pass through this, let's say, valley that you've just created. You have to tell me what's behind that valley. How long is the valley? Does it go upstream somewhere? In this instance, it does not.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Well, yeah, let me try and phrase this correctly. So I think it's our commission's purpose to try and avoid, it's the no fill rule. However, I think what this gentleman's saying is that if there's a singular instance of fill, it really won't cause an effect. But this singular instance of fill might cause a precedent that would create multiple instances of fill. And if there were multiple instances of fill, that would affect the water flow.
No, let's hold it right there. I'm not interested in precedents. I'm interested in the engineering of it. You could take that entire area of the coast, and of all the neighbors, it doesn't matter. It's one lot or 10 lots or 20 lots. If you raise that entire coastline, if you built a levee on the entire coastline, you would not affect the tidal elevation. You would affect the delineation of the flood, because of course, if you put in a fill, it's not going to flood anymore. You'd affect the delineation, you'd shift it, but it wouldn't change the elevation.
So are we asking the wrong question? Maybe, because I do agree that if you put some fill on a property in Mamaroneck, you're not going to change the level of Long Island Sound.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this answer is sort of a macro answer. Are there potentially micro impacts of fill decisions on individual spaces of property, along Delancey Cove?
Is that a question?
Yeah, it was meant to be. I can try to rephrase it too.
Why don't you try to rephrase it?
Okay, so again, I understand we're not going to change the level of the ocean with some fill, but is it really right that if you looked, carefully at, say, one parcel of property, that a neighbor's decision to, fill or cut, but to change, the level of that neighboring property, that it would really have no impact on during like a rain plus flood event, or any kind of, whatever the most relevant flooding event you could imagine, that it wouldn't change the velocity or location of the water during the event for the neighbor?
That's correct. It will not.
All right.
Can I ask Mr. Jackson a question?
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, how would you characterize the hydrology of the applicant's lot? In terms of what are the properties? What are the properties of that land in relation to the water that either falls on it or that would be put into it?
As I said, this is a wide open area. There's no concern about constricting flows or increasing velocities. Those are concerns they occur on riverine properties, let's say. But in a wide open tidal area, they're no concern because you can't change them by putting a fill on a property. If it were a wave run-up concern, then you might change something because wave, as you can visualize, a wave hits the wall, it deflects and goes somewhere else. But this is not the case. This is simply a tidal AE flood zone, and the water slowly rises and slowly goes down again. There's no concern about the transport of the water up a tributary or out of a tributary. It does not apply. It does not apply. The concerns about filling, they're valid concerns in wetlands for environmental purposes. They're valid concerns on riverine sites where if you place a fill in a floodplain and you displace floodplain storage, that in fact increases discharges downstream of the on the waterway, on the river. That would increase the discharge. Or if you place a fill somewhere along the stream, you can constrict the conveyance of the stream, and by changing the conveyance of the stream, you change the hydraulics, and therefore you could raise the water surface upstream of the fill if you do it incorrectly. But in this particular location, because it's tidal and the tidal elevations go up and down on roughly 6 hours, and because it's wide open, you don't have to be concerned about how the water travels around the fill because it happens too slowly. And that's why in this particular instance, there's no effect that I can measure, that I can analyze if you place a fill on this particular site.
Okay, but without the fill, this particular property, does this particular piece of property have the ability to absorb water? Because I say this because the back of the property seems saturated, and I would believe that if you take saturated earth and add more water to it, there's no other place for the water to go other than over it, around it, or somewhere else, because the land as it currently exists is saturated. If it reaches 100% saturation, it cannot take any more water. That water's got to go somewhere else. So is a portion of this land saturated most of the time?
You could listen, we're talking about the rise and fall of a tide of Long Island Sound. And the fact that there's sand that's saturated and that it can absorb water, and yes, it can. And when the tide rises, let's say the ground becomes saturated, and then the tide falls, and of course, changes the hydrology. But if you took that area and paved it in concrete and would not let it, let's say, absorb, say it's dry, and then once you pave it and make it impervious, as the water rises on Long Island Sound, the amount of water that's absorbed that can be held by saturating this soil over a 6-hour period up and down is I couldn't measure that. You will not affect the elevation of Long Island Sound by paving this site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I understand what you said. Thank you very much.
Well, Andrew, actually, 1 second. So, Andrew, were you asking that question in relation to the stormwater management and the ability of the soil to be able to absorb the water that's going to be expelled from the stormwater management?
Yes, I was asking that question in relation to the stormwater management and to the septic system, because both systems release water into the ground. I wasn't really that concerned about the elevation of Long Island Sound. I was more concerned about the absorption ability of that piece of property, which seems to me at a saturation level of 100%, even at low tide. But I heard the expert.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because it sounded like it was.
While we still have Mr. Jackson on the phone, is there any other questions regarding flooding and erosion concerns as it relates to neighboring structures, neighboring sites, this property?
I have one, I think I know the answer, but I'd like to clear the record up a little bit on how Mr. Jackson's letter is worded. So the way that the third and fourth paragraphs are worded, it sort of, to me, looks like it says, in order to safely develop this site, therefore, right after talking about the lowest floor level of the construction being at base flood elevation or above.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that all of this fill is solely needed for the septic system and it doesn't have anything to do with the base flood elevation of the property of the buildings.
Yeah, you're correct, I believe, in what you said. The requirement in New York State is that the lowest living floor level of any structure has to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. And that's a federal requirement that's adopted by the state. Actually, the state added 2 feet of freeboard. It's not applicable to septic system, which is governed by other requirements I think it's the New York State Department of Health and probably the local Department of Health. So you must elevate if you have a septic system, you must elevate that as well.
And just to confirm with whoever can, because it may not be you, Mr. Jackson, but is it solely the septic that's driving the need for 420 cubic yards of fill?
I'm sorry, you got garbled. I heard something about 420 cubic yards of fill.
Yeah, is it only the septic system and not the house or garage or other elements of the construction and the base elevation of those that's driving the need for fill?
You'll ask the engineer who designed the site. The requirement is to elevate the building 2 feet above the base flood elevation. That's the lowest floor of the building. As far as that system, there's a health department requirement for freeboard above wherever your tile fields or your distribution pipes are. I don't know exactly what the freeboard has to be. It's probably a few feet as well.
Seamus, to answer your question, the fill is solely for the septic system here. The property was redesigned, so we didn't need the fill for anything else. And just to follow up also, there's no proposed fill within the wetland here. I know that's something that we started discussing, so I just wanted to clear the record.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. That was helpful for me.
Yep, I was clear that there was no fill in the wetland, but it's useful to say it again. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've hit the items I want to hit, and I think I at least have a good understanding of what information I still need in order to be ready to vote consistency. Who else has got questions on fill, septic, sewer?
Before we move on, Mr. Chairman, can I just get your list of things you need in order to determine consistency?
The only things I still think I need to cast my vote are that I think I need my own. I think the commission needs an independent hydrologist and an independent sewer engineer.
To be retained by the village.
Right.
Aside from Kellard Sessions, who's been reviewing this project. I just have to voice a little frustration on behalf of the applicant, since they've been working so closely with Kellard Sessions here, and they have had discussions about the sewer and about the stormwater, to bring in another party on their escrow account. I want to make sure the board fully considers the value of that here and the impact it'll have in terms of, time delay.
Understood, and that's a fair comment. And I really always prefer to have an applicant up in front of us for review as quickly as possible and get to the vote. I wouldn't introduce new elements unless I really needed them to know how I was going to vote.
Understood.
Chairman Byrd, I have 2 quick comments I might make.
Floor's yours, Seamus.
So are we waiting on some information from the Westchester County Department of Health on the septic? I'd always noted that, and I just didn't know where that ultimately resolved and where we were at on that.
We're working hand in hand with the health department and hope to have that approval for you guys shortly.
And then I made a comment, I think the last time that you guys were here, and with the, some time since then, I'll just ask it one more time and see if there's anything further to address. But, we came from 1,700 cubic yards of fill in July down to 1,100 in September, now at 420, I think since November consistently. Each step along the way, if you go back, I think we were told there is no other way to get this lower. Is there a path to zero for you guys? And
Unfortunately, there's not. We've looked at this. There's a number of concessions that have been made by the applicant, from lowering the size of the garage from a 3-car garage to a 2-car garage, from bulking up the design of the foundation, so that way it would be able to have flood openings and everything else, as opposed to how it was previously proposed. There's no more grade around the house. If you look at the site plans, the only spot we're putting any material is for the septic system. And when you also look at the site plans, you'll see that there's no spot for us to effectively remove material to provide an area that would offset that fill that's being brought in for the septic system. We've gone so far as to actually place the proposed stormwater management area within the existing footprint of the existing garage, to prevent us from having to bring fill in to backfill that when we change that grade. We really, really have been working, and we've sharpened our pencil as best as we can. And truly, I mean, you can see the site is we've just been chiseling away at it, and this is what we're able to prepare. You can see the only spot that there's fill here is for the septic system.
Yep, that makes sense. Helpful. And I absolutely appreciate that and can see that. It's really just the way that question was answered previously at higher levels of fill that I think required me to ask it again. So I got that. And then
Mr. Cardone, can I just ask you a quick follow-up on that?
Yes.
How did the old septic system work without fill?
The old septic system was when we explored it and looked at it, when the applicant bought the property, it was in very, very deteriorated shape. It was old clay tiles that were basically placed end to end, and when there was a camera inspection that was done and the report was circulated to the board, it was plugged solid. I can't speak for how the system was operating at the time, but I can say that it's no longer, the condition that it's in now is not.
I could just
I thought
just a question about because I've heard a couple comments. Do we know the date of when the existing septic system was in place?
1953.
Okay, so are there new regulations from the Department of Health?
Yes, regulations have changed a number of times since then.
Okay, because I was just wondering, that might help address, why wasn't it needed then and why is it needed now?
Yeah, I think we heard that at the top, that any attempt to remediate would also have to bring it up to code, and
Gotcha.
Code was quite different then. But Seamus hadn't finished.
Just to very quickly close out. So I think that in my mind, that some sort of determination from the Westchester County Department of Health on the septic is, I think, helpful before making a consistency decision. But I'd be willing to discuss that. And then I think we discussed this earlier. I just haven't really seen anything on the SWIP as far as a red line or Kellard session responses. So so I think that's an open item. Maybe some of it's in the record, but I think some of it would need to be closed out for me.
Esteban, would you be able to issue a memorandum stating that the stormwater and the drainage comments have been addressed?
Yes, I can. And then any further comments from the last review we did make, we can review and see that all those comments have been addressed, and then issue a formal memorandum.
Yeah, Esteban, that'd be helpful. I think that the way I've seen it before, I believe the last document's September 14th, but just to, note the open items from September 14th and their satisfactory resolution.
Understood.
Thank you, Esteban.
Okay. All right. That is as far as I think we can take this discussion right now. If anybody's got anything else, let me know now, or we're going to move on.
In the interest of moving forward next month, Mr. Chairman, the deadline for the February meeting, I believe, is next Wednesday. By that time, will we have an idea of the village's consultants for hydrology and septic so that we can work with them? Is there a deadline you'd like materials from us by, since, you know, we obviously won't know before that who the consultants will be?
I'm gonna have to see to this tomorrow as a priority item, and then we'll have staff reach out to you right away.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
I really do not want to see this extend any farther than it has to. I want to get my record complete and vote this thing. So I will have staff on to you tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for your time tonight.
Thank you. And we've now closed out the portion of our agenda that concerns 1165 Grecian Point. We can move to our next item, which is the first-time review of 1025 Rushmore Avenue, the Orienta Beach Club proposal. Do folks need a comfort break before we launch into that? We've been going a while.
I'm good to go. I'll keep going.
Okay. Mr. Spatz.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Chair, commissioners. This is Andrew Spatz. I thought I was logging on to the inaugural ball this evening. Where's everybody? We're in their tuxedos and, you know, fine dining attire.
Oddly enough, it's in the same place. Everything's in the same
all
place.
there, I know. While everybody's being elevated to Amber, how are you this evening? I just I asked everybody on my team to raise their hands. Hopefully everyone's following instructions, and
thank you.
I'll have a full team here, full panel. While we're doing that, it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Love seeing participation from the community. So important. I agree with you, Chair Burt. You said that at the beginning, that this committee is for the community. So it's good to see new faces. All right, I think we have everybody on. Again, Andrew Spatz, for the record, 650 Halsted Avenue, Suite 105, Mamaroneck, New York, 10543, on behalf of the applicant, Orienta Beach Club, 1025 Rushmore Avenue, Village, Mamaroneck. And before I start my mini presentation, just broad overstroke of our application. I just went into just a few people that are going to be speaking this evening. First, I have Peter Boschio, Senior Project Studio JBD, Jefferson Group Architects, Nunzio Pietrasante. I have Richard Horseman, who's a landscape architect and site planner. We have Michael Murphy, who I know everybody on this panel, I'm sure, is familiar with, Murphy Brothers here in the Village of Mamaroneck. Mark Sheehan, who is the general manager of Orienta Beach Club, and Elo Comfort, President, Orienta Beach Club. Hopefully I have not forgotten anybody. I feel like I'm giving a thank you for winning an award here. But let me kind of give a brief overlay here. The application before you this evening is pending currently, obviously, with the planning board. And we started the process back on December 9th, 2020, with simply the replacement of an existing patio and installation of an overhang over an existing elevated terrace. As many of you know, Orienta Beach Club has been present and very much an active part of our community for over 100 years, and has been a private beach club facility with dining and recreational uses, including beach, boating, tennis, swimming pools, basketball, and platform tennis. By the way, something I just started doing over the whole COVID thing was you had to get outside, and yes, I'm finally able to keep up with my kids with that. During the course of improvements, the existing patio And this is inclusive of the walks and steps would be replaced and increased only by 692 square feet. But it would include a water and retention system where none currently exists. And I think that's a very important point here. The stormwater management plan has been designed with the 2015 New York State Stormwater Management Design Manual. The improvements will enhance the functionality and flow of the existing exterior patio. The patio will be fully handicapped accessible, which is not, it is not now. And the net area that we're discussing is actually located away from the neighboring residential property. So if I'm looking from the waterfront towards the building, on the right side, there's one residential home, which is Mr. Verney, John Verney. And they being my client, the club, have intentionally moved and placing this additional square footage on the left side of the property, which is closer to the Westchester Day School. Now, obviously, this would not have any negative impacts for Mr. Verney or the club or the school, because the school are Monday through Friday and during business hours or school hours from 8 to 3 p.m., hopefully, God willing, in the year to come, with the change of circumstances. And so there won't be a competing use here. When the club's using it, it'll be during the evenings and weekends when school's not in session. Equally as important, there'll be a new landscaping added, and we have an individual to speak about that. That's Richard Horseman. The improvements will also include the installation of an overhang, which will permit greater use of the outdoor patio during inclement weather. And given this global pandemic, it provides additional options for outdoor dining. The proposed improvements are indeed consistent with the 44 policies of the Village Local Waterfront Revitalization Program, and just naming a few, the proposed improvements will not cause any physical impacts, geological, vegetative, or structural, to the scenic resources in the immediate vicinity of the project. Along with the stormwater management and enhanced landscaping, the improvements have been designed to protect natural resources by minimizing any potential erosion and controlling stormwater. Again, there is no currently there's no stormwater retention present, and there are no issues with runoff or obviously with erosion. And with this small area, approximately 692 square feet of structure being, or I should say, of impervious surface being added, we do have the luxury of installing the water system. I am hoping that everybody got a package that reflected and showed the photographs of the as-is condition, and you'll clearly see that the improvements will certainly maintain the natural serenity and ecosystem that you would find along coastal property. So we have everybody on board, our architect, engineer, and landscaping, as well as the management from Orienta. So we're going to throw it back to chair and members, commissioners, for any questions so we can expand and explain anything that we may have missed in the application.
Thank you, Mr. Spatz. I guess my first question is, the proposal is to add 692 square feet of impervious surface. Is that all impervious only because of the overhang, or? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. The 692 is just inclusive of the patio, and again, our consultants and architect and engineer can discuss that in more depth. And that does not include the overhang. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is an existing, Mark, there is an existing overhang now. I'm just want to look at the pictures really quickly.
Not really. It's just a small staircase.
Okay. All right. So it's a small. So no, that's not, Chair. That's not inclusive of the overhang, but it's indicated that the overhangs an area which is currently impervious. So I guess it's actually kind of what chicken before the egg, or egg before the chicken. So you have an overhang over an
Right,
existing.
that's net zero, an impervious
right, right.
overhang over an existing impervious surface.
Exactly.
All of the added 692 square feet of new impervious surface is additional patio.
Fair enough. Yes.
I guess
Patio area.
the first item is what's under that patio area, and could you create that patio with pervious surface?
That's definitely way above my pay. That's well above my pay wage. So I'm going to pass that off
Sure,
to our experts.
That's why you pay people that can answer that.
I could do a bill application, Chair, but this one, I'm going to defer to our experts. Go ahead, gentlemen.
I could answer the question. As far as the impervious surface, do you all have the site plan drawings SP-1, SP-2 available? Have you looked at those?
I have, and I'm about to look again because you're going to walk me through something, I think.
Sure, yeah.
Chair,
exactly.
would it be helpful if we did the screen share, or do you want to utilize it on your end?
I think I can get this. Where my site plan is the second.
If you go to site plan 1, that kind of shows the difference between the existing layout and the proposed.
I'm just opening the document now.
Is that SP1 or is that which one would you like?
SP-1. Yeah, SP-1.
Okay, great.
Is the calculations on the impervious surface. I mean, I could try screen share if you want. I have the plan up in front of me. I'll click the button and see what happens. All right.
Oh,
you guys see it?
I see.
Looks like
I think the kids. Good.
I got
school pictures.
Wrong screen.
Yeah, you shared your desktop.
Desktop, not site plan.
Great smiles, though. Very good smiles.
Yeah, that's my granddaughter's.
There we go.
There you go.
You got it now? I put it on. I have a dual screen. You have it now?
There's SP1. I see it.
Yep.
Okay. So if you see here, the existing terrace, the distance from the existing sun porch rear wall to the point where the concrete planters, the kind of old, outdated concrete planters that are only for seasonal seasonal flowers or whatever, that distance remains the same as far as the impervious surface area. Not the impervious surface, the distance from the rear wall to the edge of the pavers where the curtain drain and the planting area starts. The main increase in impervious surface, because this roofed over upper terrace here, that's already obviously impervious, as we discussed before. The main increase is this area down here on the proposed plan, where we're putting a handicap ramp and extending the area to come down from the stairs, and a couple of steps here, and then a handicap accessible ramp here. So this piece right here is the majority of the additional impervious surface. There is a little bit here where we're removing the stairs on the existing, and we're bumping out a little bit here, if you could see here.
Sure.
And then the other increase is obviously, since we're cutting this stair out, we have to reconfigure the walkway to connect to the existing paver walkway. So the new stair to the lower area, this makes up the balance of the additional impervious surface. I kind of labeled it down at the bottom. So that's the explanation on where the impervious surface comes. As far as permeable pavers, if we go to drawing SP2 is the existing as it is. These are the details. Here's SP4, which is the proposed plan. The current terrace basically sheet flows out from the back of the sun porch to pass. It goes through the planters, I guess, in the joints between the planters, and then out into the grass area. There's no detention system at all. What we're proposing to do is basically pitch everything this way, but then along the we have a little edge curbing here, which will be flat with the paving stones, and it'll be pitched from here back to this, there's a little catch basin here, like 12-inch plastic catch basin and a plastic catch basin here. So the water will come down, flow into this curtain drain. There's a detail. It's basically crushed stone with a perforated pipe. It'll go into this this catch basin here, and then on the other side, on the north side, on the south side, it'll go from here into the water quality basin, and then everything's going to be at this will be at a lower elevation. Then it'll flow into the storage basins. By some chance, if and this was over designed to begin with, any backup storage. I mean, if we get a torrential rain that lasts for a week or whatever, anything that gets filled up here will go through a 4-inch relief pipe, which will basically discharge onto the existing grass, which is where it went anyway. But that probably will never see water coming out of that. As I said, most
again, I don't want to interject. And again, right now there is no
drainage system,
right?
And by the way, even with the roofs, there are a couple. There's the new roof gutters. There's existing gutters here, but we're going to capture this roof, and you can see the line here going into this water quality. So we're picking up the roof also.
Okay, that's a clear and useful discussion of what you're proposing. It is not, however, an answer to what I asked you, which was, could you build a permeable terrace here instead?
Well, they are accepting it in a lot of municipalities now. Certain systems like what is the can't think of the name offhand. The one that's always advertised on television with the guy with his family in the pool there.
You're talking about Armatech?
Yeah, Armatech. Yeah. Anyway, they do make an approved, what's considered and classified based on the definition in the industry as a permeable paving system. It's got different layers of crushed stone below, but it basically accomplishes the same thing we're doing here. Which is basically storing the water in the ground, because that allows the water to percolate into the crushed stone base over a wider area. But it's basically doing the same thing, and only certain. I mean, there are some details that you can develop, but only certain manufacturers have had things approved where it is determined to be the surface runoff number, the CN number, is determined to be.
I see you, Martin.
Below the level of what's considered permeable, impermeable.
Okay,
so it can be done, but we're accomplishing the same thing by putting the this perimeter. This is all a perimeter drain here, which I'll show you the detail right here. This is the pavers down at the bottom, detail 5. Let me get it here. Okay, so this will be the edge. That's the paver. This is the curbing flush. And then we have a concrete cradle for it. And then this is going to be your curtain drain where the water flows down, goes into this pipe, and then into the detention system. And the plantings are going to be here, located over here, which will further absorb the water.
Yeah, I got what you're doing. I've got what the proposal is. And part of what we do here is make sure the applicant is considered alternatives. I see a number that has a positive increase in impervious surface. The first obvious question is, well, could you do that with no increase in impervious surface? And the answer I just heard is maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you that you're going to have to consider whether a pervious surface option is a better way of skinning this cat. I know for sure that Commissioner Hayne has a question now, so I'm going to hand the floor to him.
Thank you, Thomas. Can you go back up to the layout?
On which drawing?
Right there. That's good.
Okay.
So I appreciate when you went through this explanation. If you compare this one to the existing, it looks like that the drainage system that you've proposed here covers the area of where the existing is, but there isn't anything that addresses the additional area that you're adding on the left and on the right and the additional walkway as far as the runoff from those areas.
Well, usually, I mean, this area here is what we're talking about here.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're basically talking about the additional 692
Oh,
square
this,
feet
yeah, all this right side.
Please let me finish my sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So we're talking about the additional 692 square feet. So the drainage system that you've proposed here does not address that additional 692 square feet. It addresses the existing patio.
No, that's not really correct, because the actual drainage system, if I go back to, let me get the design here. Let me blow it up. Come on.
Martin, you're on mute again.
Sorry. The way you explained it was that the
Okay,
pitching
so
would
if you
go
look at
from
if you look at the calculations over here, the actual, and I give a little narrative, we're actually approximately 5,000 soil percolation rate. So what we're doing is we're actually holding for over 1,292 square feet, because we're picking up some of the roof areas. So we're doing more than the 692. So if we may not be capturing, as you're saying, the piece, what is this P? We will be capturing, and let me scale this down. We will be capturing all this area up to the top of this ramp here, right here.
Right, but to the left of that.
And we'll capture
but
it.
to the left
We
of that
won't be
ramp-
capturing this, but
To the left of that, of where you just drew that line is where you're adding the new permeable surface.
where here?
Yeah, the way you described it is you're adding a new
Yeah.
ramp and that.
Well, the bump out from the existing really is, if I trace this, is like this piece right here.
Right, so how are you
Okay,
handling?
and a lot of it
how
is
are you handling runoff from
grass. A lot of it is grass area. So
Nunzio, if I
again,
can, Nunzio, it's Andrew Spatz. I just want to interject for a second. I need, and I'm hoping that everybody takes into context the area with which the back of Orienta provides between the clubhouse and the beach or the waterfront itself. The area is absolutely tremendous in square area footage. So the walkway, which Nunzio was making reference to, that's certainly not 692 square feet. You're talking maybe 90 to 250 square feet of additional walkway, which could easily be addressed by the mass area of grass, vegetation, and existing soil. So I think that with respect to the walkway, that they're just making it more accessible, especially for handicapped purposes. I think the immediate area has more than enough ability to entertain and adjust for the impervious surface.
Maybe I'm not understanding. So I'm going from your initial explanation, which was that the additional 692 square feet was being added to the left side and the right side of this patio. And so when you look at this drawing and you look at the way this system is designed, it does not show drainage or water runoff mitigation for the left side or the right side of this patio.
Commissioner Haynes, on the right side where there's the service station where you see 108, Nunzio, move it back up to the right where the service station is.
Yeah,
I believe that's being expanded upon. And if you look to the left of in 105 on the upper terrace, that's also being expanded upon. So it actually does address I think the larger area of, if you want to refer to it.
It addresses all, Andrew, it addresses, if you follow the arrow here, it goes around these stairs. So let's say the stairs and this piece go down here. Everything else is meant to flow this way. So basically from here and around here, this would be the only area that we're not capturing, because everything else is going to flow in this direction to this drain and to that drain. So this service area is going to flow down into the planting area, into the curtain drain, and basically go into this catch basin, and it's going to flow from here to there and from here to there, going into these pipes and going into the detention system. So again, if you cut a line through here, this is the only area, which is probably around 250 square feet. If you look at that totality there. And again, this is all existing grass area down here. So that would just come by sheet flow and get absorbed in the grass. Remember, I had said that the system has been designed for 1,200 and plus square feet, which is double what the net increase is, because we're picking up some of the existing roof also that really never went anywhere. It came out through and onto the terrace.
Okay, thank you. You didn't explain that pitching before from the left and the right
Sure.
side.
Okay, okay.
So that answers the question.
I apologize for that.
Okay. All right. So that's a little clearer. I had a few other items I wanted to talk about. What you just said, it's a vast area, and I know roughly what it looks like, but what's the distance from the new construction to the water?
To the water, let me see. I had it in my notes somewhere. If you look here, this is the existing, which I said basically, if you see the hatching here, that's going to be the planting area, more or less. But from this point over to the I don't know if that's the property line, and then I have one to the mean. I think I put to the mean high water level. It's 110 feet, and this is 90 feet.
Okay, so none of this is within the 100-foot buffer.
Well, it does the next, I was wondering that too. I was looking at the survey. Is the next.
That's existing as it is.
Yeah. Is the next page that you flashed to a minute ago with some, purple and teal lines, is that the survey? Or yeah.
That's the survey, yeah.
This, I think, shows the wetland line. I didn't see the wetland buffer line in it.
Let me
Wetland buffer is the farthest dashed blue line.
That's the beach.
Right there, that's it right there.
Right here.
That's it right there.
There is tidal
That's
wetland.
the tidal wetland line.
Okay, because so there's a 100-foot buffer from tidal wetland, and I don't see the buffer line marked. We're going to need that.
Okay, but again, as I said, over here where we're extending, right here, where I mean, I could show you the distance, but this is way over 100 feet where we're extending this area, and right here is going to be the same. The only thing we're doing here is bumping out a little bit right here where the existing stairs are, which is already basically impervious surface.
Right. I'm just preliminary review. We're telling you what you're going to need. We're
okay. So you want that setback.
The wetland buffer line.
100-foot wetland buffer, so we can look at it, because that has implications. Among other things, if you do anything within the 100-foot buffer, you need an environmental consultant to make a record that there will be no negative impact to the protected wetland from the work inside the buffer. So it's important to show that on the map so that we know whether we're talking about any disturbance inside the buffer or you're doing work entirely outside the buffer.
Okay, and that's from the tidal wetland line. Okay.
Yep.
And I think
tidal wetland line.
Any cut, fill, and
that was my next question.
Yeah, and impervious calculations would be helpful to know what's inside the wetland buffer and what's outside. And yeah, that's where I was going to go, Thomas. Whenever we were getting there, I didn't.
That was my next checkbox item. If anybody watched the last applicant, you know that we have recurring issues with the net fill rule, and your life is a lot easier if there is no net fill in a floodplain.
And I didn't see a grading plan at all here, but I could easily have missed it. A lot of materials here, and first time looking at this.
There is no fill.
The proposed and existing elevations, spot elevations are shown. We did get an updated, this survey was done recently, I think, as you can see by the date on it. But what's going to happen here is basically the excavation that we have from the Cultec units that are going to be installed over here is what's going to be used to, once we get rid of the planters, is what's going to be used around the perimeter to, it's basically a cut and fill. We're excavating and using it. The only thing that's going to be added would be the topsoil to dress the planting area. Obviously, you just can't put that material in. You got to put 6 or 8 inches of topsoil there. And I guess the landscape architect could address that better when he gets to go over his planting.
So it
So
sounds
the
like
answer is 0. I believe,
Yeah.
Chair, I think that's what you're
0.
asking. Is there a net change? And I don't believe there is.
No.
that is very helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Uh,
I heard that, Chair. We were watching the previous application, so I made a note on my yellow pad too on that.
And Andrew, the more, the easier that all that can be laid out for us, the better, right? To show the lines, to show the calculations, inside and outside of the wetland buffer is great.
Commissioner Work, you're talking to me, Andrew, or Andrew Maggio?
Well, I'm talking to you.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't okay.
Just because I think that, obviously we need the wetland buffer line added, and then, throughout the site plans and construction plans where you can show grading, show the cut fill calcs impervious, and make the distinction between the wetland buffer versus not is always helpful, I think, when that's broken into components.
Obviously, if when I get the distances there and show it to the existing and also to the proposed, if it's over 100 feet at any point, then it's a moot point. But obviously, if it's like 98 feet or whatever, you want that area calculation if there's any encroachment. But it probably will be no different from the existing and the proposed, because this is the part that encroaches out, that might, that is closest to this tidal wetland buffer here, right?
You're not changing that, Nunzio, correct? That is staying the same.
No, that's, yeah. So, I mean, it's getting over here widened out a little bit. There's a stair that goes in here, but that's where it gets a little wider. And then the main part is over here, which is already far away from, a good distance from here. But I'll designate all those dimensions for you for the existing and proposed, and I'll tabulate whatever needs to be tabulated.
Yeah, another thing that's usually helpful for us too is to have these lines laid over the proposed changes. And
I'll show that on there.
Yeah, not just the existing.
Yeah, I'll show both.
Okay.
Last thing on my short list, view shed. So the one area that we have absolutely defined as a view shed concern is if you can see it from Harbor Island Park. So one thing, which and you're allowed to do stuff that's visible from Harbor Island Park. The standard isn't no development. The standard is that we have to consider its impact. But since we have to consider the impact of anything you see from Harbor Island Park, and I think you can see this from Harbor Island Park, I didn't see we're gonna want a visual or a rendition that's that view, the distance view, so we can assess it in the light of the view shed from Harbor Island.
Chair, if I just could clarify, this parcel faces the Long Island Sound. You can't physically, living in Orienta and always walking on Rushmore along the west basin and east basin of Harbor Island, there's no physical way to see this property from Harbor Island. I'm trying to think, even if you're on the beach, at Harbor Island looking due southeast, you can't physically see it. So I just want to, so I can advise my clients accordingly.
Okay.
We could take pictures, but I believe me, I understand the concern, but you can't physically, you can't see this property, this parcel from Harbor Island.
Okay, it might be useful. I didn't, and if I missed it, I'm sorry. If it
That's
might
okay.
be useful to have an aerial just so we can assess that, look at it and have a record and say it's actually not within the Harbor Island view shed. And
You got it, Chair. That's easy. And I think maybe because listen, until just recently, I used to get this particular club confused with Beach Point, which one's which. And so I get that, but we can easily get a bird's eye view from above. No problem.
Andrew, I'll get an aerial map from the
Perfect.
county website, and I'll show an arrow direction from Harbor Island so you can see the view line, and you'll see what's in the way. But I just put up, you guys saw these pictures, right? I mean, we were talking about the grass area, and I mean, anything that you see, even if you saw it, if you were able to see it, the final product, obviously we're going to have plantings all over here.
And that's all going. We're taking all that down.
Yeah, all of this,
that cement, it's going.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it's God knows, I don't know the year it was put in, but even a little bit of stone wall that's under here at this point, it's certainly going to be a better appeal. The architecture obviously is going to match the existing building, the stone and everything else. But to have a planting bed here and basically, the landscape architect will discuss that. But a lot of that's going to be screened.
Yeah, I have a quick question about this picture. So you can see that the elevation of the land changes on the right-hand side of the picture. So if you're eliminating the wall, the retaining wall there, how are you going to be addressing that? If because it seems like the new plan makes everything even straight across. So is there going to be some fill
No, there'll be a pitch. There'll be a pitch, and I'll finalize those grades for you so you can see it. But we'll make a pitch, and maybe we'll rebuild a section of this wall if we have to. Basically, where these stairs are going to go right here, because they're going to go to the existing grade. So there'll be like the cheek walls of the stairs, and then whatever we need to make up this grade right here.
Okay, yeah, it would be helpful to see that view as well.
Okay, it's easier to sort of know where we are with the view shed if we know that it's not actually visible from Harbor Island Park. That really reduces how much we have to think about aesthetics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thomas?
Yeah.
Real quick, I happen to be at the site with Frank Tivolacci over the summer, and I can verify that there's no view of Harbor Island from this back patio area. It goes straight across to Long Island.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, it's right. Now that
Chair,
I'm thinking
I'll go
about
to Manhasset. I'll take a picture from Manhasset from the portion of Long Island. I'm just kidding.
Now that I'm thinking about where it is, I realize. But yeah, I'd like to have an aerial just so that we can say we've touched that base on the record. That you can't see it from Harbor Island.
We got that.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do. Okay, I've run through my checklist of items. Martin, you got anything else?
No, thank you.
Seamus, Lisa, Andrew.
Not me.
Chair, just so I can kind of round third here. So I have 3 items. One, could surface be a pervious as an alternative for the additional sidewalk or walkway that we're utilizing? So rather than impervious, explore type of pervious surface. Distance from patio to the waterfront or the tidal wetland buffer line. You want to obviously see that. Any disturbance within that wetland area, and obviously the bird's eye view of the property. So I have 3 particular items, and obviously I understand Commissioner Hayne would like to see the grade outlines, which we will certainly, I'm making the note right there. We'll get that for you.
Thank you.
If I may, before we conclude, does anyone from the club, either Mark or Elo, would you like to address Chair and commissioners?
Well, before we do that, the other thing that next time you're up in front of us, we're gonna talk about permit checklists and any other permits you need. So let's just sort of preview that.
Yeah, I was going to suggest I actually had that written down as well. I believe all is in order, but if you feel that we're missing something or we want something, then yeah, but let's flush that out because it'd be great and it'd be ideal because we probably won't come back before you until February.
Okay,
so
yeah, that's
by
our
the
next.
time, yeah.
ACE, do you need anything?
Army Corps of Engineers, I don't believe so, but I'll double check. I don't believe so.
Okay. Department of State.
Again, I don't think we meet the threshold for that, but I'll double check it.
Okay. Have you ticked the SHPO box? Is this a historic building or eligible for listing?
Okay, I'll have to check that.
No, Joe, I think you did that. I think
I don't believe it is. No. But I'll double check on that too. That's 1, 2, 3 items. Okay.
What else? Do you need anything from the county?
No, I don't believe.
Okay, that's what. So. All right, that's what I can think of right away. Is there another permitting authority that we should keep our eye on? If anybody can think of one, let me know. FEMA is. You need to meet a. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think we need anything from them. This is in a type X zone, which is like 0.2% chance of a 500-year storm.
Okay.
On an annual basis.
All right. So that's the short permit checklist. And so I'm through my items.
Actually, if we can, Richard, can you just share maybe a little bit with the vegetation and landscaping if you are still on? I can't see who's on and off, but do you want to just
take
maybe
the sharing off on my screen, or yeah, because I don't have the landscape plan.
No, I know, and I know that Richard spoke with our landscape consultant for the village, Susan Oakley. So I just want to make sure that the chair and commissioners are aware that we're very proactively taking care of the landscaping component as well, because I know some of the members back on Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee, we like landscaping, we like vegetation. So I want to make sure we have that covered.
32 square miles of Westchester County drain right into our harbor. If we don't
Yes,
think
it's
about
true.
where the
And
water
I was
goes.
listening to you about that. Richard, you on, bud? Amber, do you know if he's maybe he has his mute on? Let me see if I can see.
Andrew, he might be a phone call.
Okay. Thank you. Richard.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. What is the name? Richard?
Yeah, Richard, but he may be on a phone number. I'll just give you the first two digits.
Richard. He has no last name, so I don't know.
220. Richard. I'm sorry, Richard. I should know this by heart by now.
No, the person.
It's Richard Horstman.
Oh, here, yeah.
Listed.
220 would be the phone number.
I just put through someone named Richard. I don't know if that's your Richard.
Richard, you there, buddy?
He's on mute.
You know what I'm going to do? Would it be acceptable to chair and the fellow commissioners to, I'm going to try calling him on my cell and try to hook him in that way, if that's okay.
We can make it work.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, perfect. We hear you, Richard.
Okay, you can. Sorry, the microphone was being covered up. As long as I can be heard, let me say that I've been talking and coordinating with Susan Oakley regarding the appropriate plant materials to be used in the plant bed along the edge of the lower terrace. The plant bed size will remain as shown on the drawings. They've been previously submitted, or that you're looking at now. I'm adding the plants for that bed Susan has given me the plant list that is in the village code, and additionally, in discussing the plants with her, she has indicated that some native wetland area type plants can also be considered for this plant bed. I expect I'll have the planting plan for her review in the next couple of days. And I'm trying to select the plants that will remain low in height to minimize the amount of pruning that would need to be done and to keep the views open to the water, and plants that will have seasonal color and interest along the edge of the lower terrace. I've assembled a plant list, and it looks like we're going to have a fair number of flowering shrubs and some perennial native flowers as a combination along there. And that's the summary of the situation.
Thank you, Richard.
I have a quick question. So is the preference going to be towards native plants, or is it going to be towards ornamental?
It's going to be a combination of, well, native, wetland, anything that's been approved for a situation like this.
Richard, Susan Oakley sent you a list, correct?
Yes, yes.
Right.
She sent me a list, and I've subsequently talked with her about the list and about expanding, being able to expand it for other plants that are not on the list, but acceptable for these kinds of situations.
I just brought that up because our preference is always native plants. So if it could be all native plants, that would be definitely better in our eyes. So.
Okay. Did any of my fellow commissioners have anything else? I don't think so. I think
Wonderful.
we've taken this as far as we can tonight, and we look forward to seeing you back.
Commissioner, just so I Chair, just so I have an understanding, we'll get these documents. We'll then circulate them back to Amber, who can circulate it to Chair and fellow commissioners. We're scheduled, I think, to go back to planning in about 2 weeks. And my question to you is only because ideally the club would love to start doing their project in early spring with the thaw. If we are able to accomplish provide you the documents, which I know we will be by the next meeting, is it likely, if everything falls into place, we could find a consistency on that date?
I don't
want to put you on the spot, but
I would dearly love to have more applications that we can review for preliminary once, consistency once, vote, and not see again. I would love to make that happen.
Wonderful, Chair.
In terms of percentage chance, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that I would dearly love to notch another 2-touch application.
Listen, I was going to ask you guys about the likelihood of the Mets making it to the World Series, so I was going to go percentages on this, but I guess I won't tonight.
I would not opine. I would really like to be able to say we had another 2-touch application. We reviewed it preliminarily.
Wonderful.
We reviewed it for consistency. We voted it bye-bye. That would be great.
Great. We'll do everything we can to get everything in order.
I will tell you, we try to be as clear in communicating where our concerns are as we can be. The one thing we spent a lot of time talking about is whether it's possible to use pervious surface as an alternative to mechanical water management. Really, either come with a record that lets us say, okay, they've fully considered that, and what they've proposed is a better way to do it, or come with a record that says, when we looked into it, you know what, actually, we have a better idea. But come with a record that lets us say we're done with this issue. It gets us to a vote faster.
Understood. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good to see everybody. Anything else from my
Thank you.
team? Anybody?
I
Okay.
think I'm talked out.
Thank you for your time, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Folks.
Have a good night.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, everybody.
You
Be
too.
well.
Good night.
Now I just have to figure out how to get out of here. Otherwise, I'll be stuck with you all tonight. All right. Good night. All right. Let's see.
All right. I don't think we have much to talk about with 652 Shore Acres. That was put over to the next meeting. Amber, are we waiting for something on that? Do we know why they kicked it?
The applicant requested to adjourn.
Yeah, I'm asking a different question. Are they waiting
why?
for?
And I guess I'd need to follow up with them specifically.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't know, you don't have to follow up. I just thought we might know the reason. Okay, we have 2 block grants that we should be voting consistency tonight. And I guess let's just take those early if we can, right? That those are C and D. Can we get those out of the way? We had, hearing no objection, we had previously considered the we did not vote these at the work session, but we talked them to death and I think reached a conclusion that we're ready to vote. If I'm wrong, somebody tell me.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. So Charles, this is typically we would like to have our resolutions done ahead of time and ready to vote. And obviously we've had our processes a little disrupted by turnover and events, and that's just going to have to be okay. So usually we have a resolution in front of us when we're ready to vote them. But given the urgency of getting the CDBGs done and the circumstances, I think we ought to go ahead and vote it with if members are comfortable voting it with a resolution to be drafted after. These are fairly straightforward. We're not doing conditional or anything. These are for clean consistency.
Sure. Now, just let me ask just a general question because I'm new. Would you guys, do you have a template resolution that you use? And would you like me to do the drafting of the resolutions for your signature, Mr. Chair?
So different village land use boards have done this a little differently, and typically planning wants staff to draft their resolutions, but historically we've had council draft ours.
Sure, no problem.
Because they are sometimes fairly involved and, for a variety of reasons. Historically, we've had council do them.
Okay.
I think we may change that sometime in the future, but I think for now we should stick with our practice of having council draft the resolutions. And we can give you some samples of our past resolutions.
Chairman Burt?
Yes.
Before we get too far down the path here, so I didn't mean to interrupt if you wanted to finish a thought there, but before we go too far down the path, I wanted to ask you a question about the plan here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my recollection, and help me remember, is that we had sent letters, regarding these items in. We have had a couple of discussions around how it would be very difficult to vote consistency on these items without, a set of plans and the type of information that we usually request from applicants.
Seamus, thank you. Thank you for reminding where we were in a different place on this than I thought we were. We sent our communication, which is that we don't have a complete plan. We can't vote consistency on these. We can only tell you that based on the plan. We've touched this base. These are done. I
didn't know if there was something new.
That was my bad. I should have taken these off agenda. We dealt with these at the work session. We made our communication to the board regarding these applications. We don't vote full consistency until they come back to us for the full plan. That was my bad. We were real clear on where we were at the work session, and I with the focus on the applicant items that were up tonight, one of which was very involved. I lost track of where we are. Thank you, Seamus, for reminding me. We don't need to vote these tonight. we made our preliminary determinations, and we have touched that base, and that's done. That leaves us only the moving forward the process of proposed amendments to the LWRP.
Yeah, and on that front, what I'd say, but welcome, any discussion that's worth having. I've asked Amber to post, and she has the red line of the LWRP to this meeting's agenda. So that's sort of on public record as of the point at which we're picking it up, the red line from back in March of 2020.
I'm so sorry. I just want to very quickly jump back to the grants. When you're saying that you made those recommendations to the Board of Trustees, was that letter sent to the Board of Trustees?
Oh, I thought it was. So if it wasn't, we're going to have to circle back to this very quickly.
Okay. And were you under the impression that I had sent that letter to the Board of Trustees? And
All right.
did you send me that letter? In which case, perhaps we can coordinate from there.
All right. It's been a heck of a week. Now I got to check. Let's deal with this offline tomorrow morning when everybody's had a night's sleep. Well, we certainly reached a conclusion about what we were doing. I thought at one point I'd signed off on text of a letter. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but we've got the board's given its, the commission's given its input. We just need to make sure that got formalized. And if it didn't, we'll do it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I should have had that clear in my head, and I didn't. I was focused on the applicants because it was a big night on the applicant front. Okay. And now, so LWRP, Seamus, you're in the middle of the sentence.
So back to that. If Amber, is that work? Are you good? Okay. So I think we now have kind of posted to the record here the red line that's going to be the starting point, as we've discussed at our work session, which was public as well. We have a issues list and a small working group to move forward. So I don't think there's any discussion to be had. I think our team needs to do what we discussed at the work session. And what I think we would do is, in advance of the next February meeting, again on the agenda, we would have posted the progress that we've made on this document and perhaps our issues list as we populate that. And so I would expect to add those documents. My goal for the next, for February would be that we would have our issues list populated substantially, and that we would just take this red line and clean it up, accept comments, accept things that are good to go, and start moving from there. And so unless anyone has anything to add, I think we just have to do the work in between these meetings and kind of update on status on the meetings themselves.
Sounds right to me. Thank you very much, Seamus. Thank you for taking the laboring oar on this. I really appreciate it.
Seamus, I just wanted to clarify real quick. Did we identify already who you wanted to clean up those red lines, or is that something you want to discuss in the small working group?
I think Steve, me, you, and Amber Martin probably should just discuss. I think there's a couple discrete kind of work streams to get to the next work session, which we have a couple weeks before. And so let's do that, because I know one of the things we want to do is just inventory the maps and try to decide what we're going to do. And then we need to clean up the document. So let's decide who it makes sense to take a stab at that.
Okay. Yeah. That works. Thanks.
Okay, so I think there's some follow-up with staff first thing tomorrow on an applicant item and a couple of non-applicant items. And other than that, we have run our agenda for the evening. There's minutes outstanding. I haven't had the time with them, so I want to punt that. And with that, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, folks, for a useful and productive meeting, for volunteering your time, because none of us gets paid to do this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Good night.
Night.